Growth is at the heart of what startups are.
Why do you believe growth is an equation?
I found that there were common patterns that kept repeating themselves time and time again. There were sort of 5 really, really big trends that I think have a really positive effect on growth, and 2 trends that have a really negative effect on growth. And so I believe that growth is the number one job of the founder. And so you might have the best idea in the world, but unless you can unlock those funding milestones, you're stuck. Those first, that first 18 months, you need to, and then the next 18 months, you need to. But the thing that separates a bootstrap company from a fast growth startup is growth.
Yeah.
Andy is a legend in the field of UX and product design. He first came to prominence as an early pioneer of web standards, thanks to his hugely popular blog and his best-selling book, CSS Mastery. He's also the founder of UK's first dedicated UX agency, along with its first and arguably best UX conference. His latest book, The Growth Equation, is a must-read playbook for any startup founder.
When people come to you as a VC, you're looking at the team. Who's going to sell this? Is this you as the founder? Are you charismatic? Are you charming? Are you willing to go out there and have conversations? Or are you going to hide away and hope someone else will do that for you? Because they probably won't.
Is there sort of a KPI or some trends that you as a founder can track or look at pre-revenue to understand if your company really grows or not, and which are the healthiest to look at?
Actually, that's the wrong question. For some early stage companies, it could just be as simple as, or it might be, I think a lot of founders want to have some kind of magic bullet, some silver bullet. We just do this one thing and everything will be fine. But that's not how the world works. There's dozens of kind of things that you could track. It doesn't really matter which one you're picking. Everyone's really excited. The founder is like, my vision is better than anything out there. I'm going to launch the product, and suddenly everyone is going to come out of the woodwork and they're going to start using the product. And they launch, and nobody cares. So a lot of the time, if you've got a product-focused builder, they need to really, then you'll suddenly start to get loads of people coming through the door. So that's the first problem that people face, is they don't position it right. Like, what you need is you need to have somebody who will not deliver a playbook, but will help you build the playbook.
How does a good enough MVP look like?
You've got to...
Hello everyone, this is day 1 of How to Web conference. It's amazing to be here in Bucharest and to meet with friends, with investors, with startups, with partners, and to have amazing speakers joining our podcast. I will not give any other spoilers. I invite you to watch the episodes, and I want to give a special thanks to the friends and partners at How to Web to help us make this happen. Andy, welcome to our podcast. I'm super happy to host you. Just walk us a bit through your history, your expertise a bit, so people know who's Andy and what are you doing right now.
Well, I guess I've had sort of 3 separate careers, maybe more.
3 separate lives.
Yeah, well, sort of. I mean, I was an early kind of web fanatic back when it was mostly people who were hobbyists on the web before people were really making money. And I discovered really early on this kind of new technology called CSS, which nobody was using, and there weren't any browsers that supported it. But wow. I discovered it, I read the spec, I thought this is going to be the future. And so I started talking about this stuff. And when the first ever browser came out that supported it, which was Mac 5.5 on the web, so Mac 5.5 on Mac rather, I decided to build an early blog, an early personal site. And it turned out I had the 3rd ever CSS-driven site in the UK.
And that was back in...
That was back in maybe 2021 or something, wow. 22. I think IE 5.5 on Mac was sort of then. And so I got really into this new technology called CSS. Before that, I was doing a lot of general web design. I was a web designer and also did a lot of Flash stuff, Flash animations, Flash games. But when I found this thing called CSS, I fell in love with it and just thought, this is where the industry's going. So I wrote a book called CSS Mastery, which I believe some of your audience might have heard of back in the day. I wrote it in 2005. Wow! And I think it was like maybe the 2nd ever book about CSS and design. So it was really early. It sold a ton of copies. And I got a bit of a name for web standards, and so I used to speak at conferences, South by Southwest, all about this web standard stuff. And so I guess a lot of people might know me as a developer, a designer that kind of codes HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But at the time, I was wanting to start an agency. And I was thinking, well, we could start this agency and it would all be about CSS. But like very, very soon, this is just going to be how people build the web. So there'd be no differentiation. But there was another thing that I was starting to do. I was kind of exploring these different worlds. I was where most people would just start, opening up Photoshop and making a website look pretty. I would go and do some research, and I would then use that research to, draw out diagrams of how the website would be structured, and I would be drawing out page flows of like what would be on individual pages. And I started discovering that people called this user experience. First of all, they called it usability and information architecture, and then this company in the US, an agency called Adaptive Path, coined the term, or arguably promoted the term, user experience design. They were the first UX design agency, arguably in the world. And I thought, I really like what these guys are doing. I want to be the first UX agency in the UK. And so I founded a company called Clear Left, and we were the first UX agency in the UK. And for the first 3 or 4 years, every time we went to people to pitch our work, people would like, well, why are you taking twice as long, and why are you twice as expensive? Like, why don't you just open up Photoshop and make it look pretty? Why are you asking all these questions? Why do you want to understand what our users want and need? And so it took quite a while for us to kind of
You had to educate a lot.
We did. So we did a lot of talks, we did a lot of workshops, we did a lot of writing. I started the first UX conference in the UK called UX London. And maybe even one of the first, few in Europe. And slowly over time, UX became the default way of working, to the point now that people don't even really talk about UX, really, because it's just like how we do stuff. Yep. It's become like
and
air
it's
and
everywhere
water.
now.
It's everywhere. And so I ran that agency for about 15 years.
Wow.
Really popular, flew over the world, did loads of conferences, loved it. But since quite a while now, but the agency world has, or the industry has moved away from agencies. People started building teams in-house. There was a time when you go to a conference and it was all agency people on the stage, and now it's all startups. And so I realized if I wanted to keep having an impact, I needed to move into the startup space. And so the current kind of phase of my career at the moment is working in the startup world. So I work for a VC fund, a pre-seed seed fund called Seedcamp. They're one of the sort of the longest running funds in Europe. They're regarded as one of the top 3 funds in Europe. It's a pretty poor measure, but I think we've got 10 or 11 unicorn investment companies in our portfolio, which is that's not a lot for US standards, but in European standards, that's pretty impressive. And so I've helped them. I mentored with them since they started in 2007, I think.
Wow.
And so I've been working with them on and off for ages. And so when I left my agency, when I sold my agency, the founders, Carlos and Reshma, I had a little chat with them and like, well, why don't you come and help us out? And so for the last sort of 4 years, I've been working as a venture partner at Seedcamp, helping founders on their early sort of startup journey. And a lot of the challenges they faced, I was kind of, from the agency world, I kind of understood them. I worked with big companies and small companies, startups and established companies. And so, I started seeing these patterns emerge. And that's where this new book came from, is 3 or 4 years of working with startups. I kind of realized, there were these common problems that happen time and time and again. And actually partly, a lot of people write, whether it's blogs or books, it's to help them understand a space. And so I've actually found writing the book has been really helpful for me. When I would have conversations previously with founders, I would have the ideas, but I wouldn't have articulated them perfectly. And having spent the last year writing a book, now when somebody asks me a question, I can pull a chapter or a page or concept from the book and go, this is the way that you need to think of it. And so the book's been really helpful to me, and hopefully it will be helpful to all of these founders. And I've as you can imagine, I've been sharing it with a lot of my network. A lot of my network have been saying, God, I wish I had this book 2 or 3 years ago when I started on this journey. So that's really the purpose of the book, to take all the knowledge I've learned supporting founders as a VC and an advisor and help them get over these sort of common challenges and hurdles.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to ask about the book in the kind of beginning of this episode, why this title? Why The Growth equation? Why, I don't know, the growth path, the growth. Why do you believe growth is an equation?
Well, I mean, to be honest, partly it's just a catchy title. I think if you're writing a book, marketing and positioning, you want to come up with something that kind of stands out and encapsulates what you're trying to communicate. But I also, like I said, I found that there were common patterns that kept repeating themselves time and time again. And as I started thinking about these patterns, I started realizing that there were sort of 5 really, really big trends that I think have a really positive effect on growth, and 2 trends that have a really negative effect on growth. And I found that kind of putting them into an equation format where you could say, growth is a function of these 5 positive things divided by these 2 negative things was a really simple way of encapsulating the core idea. Now, in reality, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of things. And so different people might want to write their own equation, or it might be, so I'm not suggesting for a start that this is the only way to do things.
It's not one size fits all.
No. But I just find that I just kept coming back to these sort of 7 ideas or arguments that that were sort of almost at the hub of every single problem. And so I just thought, well, that's the easiest way to start the book. And so the book, literally the first chapter is just introducing the equation. That could have just been a blog post. I could have just kept it at that. But the book isn't just I see a lot of books where they have a simple idea and they stretch it and they stretch it out. It's this is not one of those books. The growth equation is really just the framing. But actually the book is all about that early stage journey. How do you find those early customers? How do you connect the value that your product has with your users? How do you bring users into the product and situate them and get them using and getting them value? How do you keep them there and prevent them from churning? And then how do you help users kind of bring in new customers into your product? And then at the same time, how do you do pricing? How do you decide what your go-to-market strategy is? The book is all about these things, and the equation itself is just a catchy title and a way of framing some of those conversations.
Why do you believe growth is such of that importance for startups and for founders? Should they focus on growth? How much? And maybe, I know I didn't read the book yet, because is it already available?
No, it's not. It's not. Actually, the copy you've got on the table is probably the first time anyone's seen the physical book. It's out in about 2 weeks' time. It's out in the 17th of October. So it's coming very soon, hopefully.
Perfect.
We've already got a bunch of people who have bought pre-copies of Kindle, so you can go and grab it on Amazon. But the physical books will be available in about 2 weeks' time. But
Yeah, we'll bring the link in the description. Maybe we'll also get sort of a discount code. I don't know if you do that or not.
Well, I would love to. Amazon doesn't do that kind of stuff. It's really annoying. I would love to be able to hand everybody an amazing discount code, but I haven't figured out a way to kind of hack Amazon to do that yet. But maybe. But to answer your question, growth. I mean, arguably, the difference between a startup and a regular company is growth.
This was exactly the point I was expecting to have, because at the core, I also believe that the growth is what differentiates startups of all the other, small companies or newborn companies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Growth is at the heart of what startups are. And the way that you, and if you look, I don't want it just to be all about funding, but the reason you are able to get funding is because most VCs like me realize that these startups require a certain amount of upfront investment. You need to spend 6 months, 9 months building the product. You need to bring people in. You need to kind of build a team, and that is costly. And most people can't bootstrap that. Most people can't bootstrap a 10-person team just on their own money. So we have to fund you in those early stages. But the sort of the contract that you're making is that funding will then allow you to grow, and it will allow you to grow rapidly. And it will allow you to grow rapidly partly because you are using software to scale human labor. You are using the internet to scale distribution. And so, you can scale much faster with a digital driven, kind of tech driven company than you can making a coffee shop or a bar or, whatever, traditional company. That doesn't mean that running a traditional company isn't good. It also doesn't mean that having a slow growth bootstrap tech company isn't good. But the thing that separates a bootstrap company from a fast growth startup is growth.
Yep.
And the reality is, if you want to unlock that next round of funding and the round of funding after, the funders who are giving you that money want to have some kind of strong belief and strong signals that you are growing at a rate that will eventually get them their money back. And so those first, that first 18 months, you need to show a certain amount of traction in order to unlock the next round of funding. And then the next 18 months, you need to show even more traction to unlock that next round of funding. And so you might have the best idea in the world, but unless you can unlock those funding milestones, you're stuck. And if you can't show the growth at the point to get that funding, then you're also stuck. And so I believe that growth is the number one job of the founder, and it's everything they should be thinking about. They should live and they should sleep it. And this is what I think one of the fundamental challenges I meet with a lot of founders. Most of the founders I meet, first of all, they're product people, and so they love building products. They don't love building companies. They love building products. And you end up with all these beautiful products that have no users. They have no customers. They have no growth. And they often struggle to kind of get their head around the fact that they are in charge of growth. And so they'll bring in other people. They'll bring in a head of sales, a head of marketing. But these people don't know the product as well as you. They don't know the market as well as you. They don't care as much as you. And so you often find that growth stalls. So I think, and one of the big parts of the book is in the early stages, you can't outsource growth to a third party. You can't outsource it to a head of design a head of sales or head of marketing. You can't really outsource it to an external SDR company. You have to own that. But that means with most founders, it takes them away from the thing they love, building, making, doing product stuff. And so that is quite a fundamental switch. And it can be a real challenge. But I think that's kind of what this book is around, to realize that, you can't just open the door and hope that loads of people will come and discover your product by magic. That is a process that requires time, it requires effort, it requires skill. And hopefully this book will kind of teach you how to do that.
Is there sort of a KPI or some trends that you as a founder can track or look at pre-revenue to understand if your company really grows or not, and which are the healthiest to look at? Because pre-revenue, post-revenue, it's maybe easier because you have all the numbers, but pre-revenue or maybe even pre-product, how can you measure that? Because we work a lot with people that they just have an idea and they just starting, they are pre-everything most of the time.
Again, I think this is one of the things I'm trying to sort of steer away from. I think a lot of founders want to have some kind of magic bullet, some silver bullet. We just do this one thing and everything will be fine. We just use this one growth hack and everything will be fine. We just pick this one KPI and everything will be fine. And it'd be really easy for me to go, well, you just use this magic number. But that's not how the world works. And the reality is that there's no perfect metric or KPI. What you need to be demonstrating is you need to be demonstrating momentum. And you need to be demonstrating momentum in an area that you can kind of track and is meaningful. For some early stage companies, it could just be as simple as the speed at which your wait list is growing. Or it might be, your wait, if you've got some sales happening already, it might be your weighted pipeline. Or it might be, if you've not started selling yet, but you've got people using it, it might be daily active users, or it might be, how regularly people are using features. There's dozens of kind of things that you could track. It doesn't really matter which one you're picking. Actually, that's the wrong question. The thing is, just pick one that you think is going to be aligned with the value your product delivers, because this is really what VCs are particularly looking for. They're looking for proof that people are getting value consistently from your product in a meaningful way. And so if you can pick a metric that shows there's demand, shows there's interest, and show that you're moving into value delivery, then as long as it's growing at a decent rate. And I generally think there's lots of kind of metrics and kind of recommendations out there. But I think if you are growing whatever that metric is at kind of 6-7% week on week, up to maybe 10% week on week, then you're in a really good place.
Nice.
If you're not growing at all, it doesn't really matter what metric you pick. Because none of it is moving. But you can tell. It's easy. Is it numbers of users? Well, we had 10 users this week. We've got 11 users next week. Well, we've gone up by 10%. The week after, if you go up by one user, it's now not 10%. It's now 8% or 9%. If you're just using absolute numbers, one new user a week, it's not good. Whereas if it was 10 users moving to 11, and then it's 13, and then it's 15, then it's 18, and then you start to see the exponential growth. And so even if it's just small numbers, even if it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 users, you're seeing that it's ramping up. And so it's the rate of growth that is important rather than absolute numbers. And the metric, it's whatever North Star metric you think is best relevant to the value your product delivers.
You were talking about the value delivered and the fact that these KPIs needs to show that value for the users. And the second chapter of the book is building a genuinely useful product. What does useful mean in your, words? And how do you build a useful product versus a non-useful product?
Well, I'll answer it slightly differently. So the problem that I see a lot of founders have is they have a vision for what they would like their product to be. That vision is often in their heads and it hasn't been manifested. And the actual process of pitching is talking about their vision, maybe showing some screenshots, but trying to get people excited and you get money. Then you spend the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months building out that vision. And it's often only at the point where you start building that it starts taking shape. And a lot of the really important decisions, like they were fuzzy things in your head, and they become solid as you start sketching them out, doing Figma diagrams or drawings or interface elements, handing them to the engineering team to build. And so the product becomes emergent. Now, what typically happens is 6-9 months in, the product is built. Everyone's really excited. The founder is like, my vision is better than anything out there. I'm going to launch the product. And suddenly everyone is going to come out of the woodwork and they're going to start using the product. And they launch and nobody cares and nobody comes. And somebody comes one day and a few people come later, but then they can't figure out how the product works and they leave. And founders found themselves really stuck because they honestly believe that their product was superior. And the market is not giving them that proof that it's superior. And the difficulty is at that stage, it's hard to know whether the product is the problem or the market is the problem. We talk about product market fit. And actually the equation is all broken down into these are product attributes, these are market attributes. A lot of the time, if you're a product builder, you have this belief of if you build it, they will come. I talk about this as the field of dreams fallacy. You build it, you think it's better and people will come. But if they don't know that it's better, if they don't know how it's better, if they don't know why it's better, if they don't know who it's for. And so a lot of the time, if you've got a product-focused builder, they need to really figure out the market stuff and they need to position it right. If you've seen April Dunford, I think she's speaking to you later, nailing that positioning, figuring out language market fit, figuring out how you communicate your product's qualities, attributes, the reason why people should use it in the language that lands with them, then you'll suddenly start to get loads of people coming through the door. So that's the first problem that people face is they don't position it right. Once people actually start coming in, that's when they start to experience the value. And often the value that you're delivering isn't the value that you've sold to them. You've had a really amazing, maybe you've got an amazing pitch. Maybe you've hired an amazing salesperson or a marketer, and they tell you that your product is going to solve all of their problems, and they come on board, and onboarding is painful and it's full of friction, and you land in this empty space, with no, you land on a dashboard, but there's no data in it yet, and it's not really clear what you have to do, and you have to spend ages inputting a whole bunch of stuff until the value comes out, and you don't have time for this. And so you go back to your old way of working and you forget about it, and you think, I'll come back to that product in a week or two's time, and you never do. And so the big part of that product side is making sure that you understand what the value is, you deliver it quickly, you build that value generation over time. It's one of the arguments in the growth equation is value delivery over time. And you can do that consistently so you can break over the friction of people changing their behaviors. Because this is ultimately what we're talking about. We're talking about behavior change. Trying to get people going from the current way they do things to a new way of doing things.
That's basically the adoption.
Yeah, it is absolutely. And people are not going to experience the value unless you can get them over that hump. And so you need to get them in, you need to get them situated, you need to get them to that aha moment as quickly as possible. You need to get them experiencing value so they come back tomorrow to get more of that value, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And you need to keep feeding them that value. And a lot of the time, founders have an idea that they think this is where the value will be delivered, but they're not using their product. They're not watching users use it. They're they're hoping that value will get discovered rather than sort of giving it to them on a plate. And this is why design and growth-led product management is so important. A lot of founders think that the way that we deliver more value is just by adding more features. But the reality is, if people are not getting the value you currently have, adding more features isn't going to help. It might help in the long term, but just adding feature, it's called the feature fallacy, and so you still need to be adding features, but you need to be having some people on the team going, okay, well, people aren't using this feature and this feature. How can we make it more obvious? How can we make clarity around what the value is that we can get out of this feature? And so a big part of it is comms. A big part of it is explaining why these features are good and getting people utilizing time and time again before you worry about adding X, Y, Z. You need to deliver the value the current product has already in it. So it's that balance.
How do you recommend getting your beta customers working closer with you to make sure that you deliver the right thing, the useful thing for them?
I mean, this is another problem that I think a lot of founders have, is they have a vision, but have a hypothesis of what their product will do. They then go and raise a whole bunch of money based on that hypothesis. And so that hypothesis becomes locked in their mind.
Yeah.
This is the thing I have to build. They go and tell their friends.
And they take the money they raised as a validation.
Exactly, yeah. The money is a validation. The other validation they get is they go to their friends and they say to their friends, I'm thinking of leaving my company to start this new business. What do you think? And everyone that they talk to, either they say, don't do it, it's too risky, and they learn then to not listen to people. I'm not going to listen to that person. Or someone says, that's brilliant, you go and do it. And that is also validation.
Yeah.
And so they learn this really difficult, wrong thing is when I talk to customers, I ignore the negative feedback I get, and I only focus in on the stuff that says I'm going on the right direction. And so a lot of people head off down the wrong path, thinking it's the right path and not listening to anything else. And so I think as a founder, you need to do the opposite. You do obviously emotionally, you need to make sure that you feel like you're heading in a good direction. But when people tell you, I've seen this so many times, when founders talk to prospects and prospects say, oh, I don't understand that, or I think that's wrong, or that I wouldn't use that. They kind of ignore it. Or they try and convince them. It's like, oh, well, you would use this, and they go into the big spiel rather than going,
you don't understand it.
Yeah, rather than going, oh, that's interesting.
It's your fault.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than going, oh, that's interesting. Why wouldn't you use it? Tell me more. You have to fall in love with your users. You have to fall in love with the problems. You have to really understand, because you might have made an assumption that is fundamentally wrong, and that will then mean that you spent 6 or 9 months building the wrong thing. And by the time that you're ready to listen, because you've launched the product now and no one's using it, if you're lucky, you've got a bit of runway left. And if you're lucky, if you're willing to let that signal come in and go, oh no, we need to do something different, then you might have another 6 or 9 months worth of money left to make a change. But that's really, really tight. Half the people I see that pivot don't end up being able to do it successfully in time and run out of money. So being really, really open to have these conversations and fall in love with the problem, don't fall in love with the solution. This is the challenge. Your job is to fall in love with the problem. And I think, I come from a design background. I think designers are brilliant at this. Like, designers are really good at understanding and listening to customers and not just focusing on the things that they say they want, but also trying to understand why they want them, what they want, what they don't want, why don't they want them, trying to build that picture of the mental model. And so I think, really good product leaders, really good designers can help temper the necessary bravado of founders that want to just go and head in one direction only. And so it's a balance there.
So you build a growth-based product startup. You have a useful product. You're ready to launch it. How do you build, and how does a great go-to-market strategy look like?
I mean, again, there's an interesting thing here. There's often, I think, a little bit of a cart before the horse. And by that, I mean, if you are a person that loves building product, you want to spend the next, once you've raised money, you want to spend the next 12 months just building. And then what happens is you get to and often you don't even know what you're building. You go, oh, I can't put a website up because we haven't quite figured it out yet. And so you don't have a website, you have a kind of a rubbishy landing page. And you spend 6, 8, 12, 18 months building. and then you launch, and people look at it and go, I don't know what this is. And partly because all of the product is hidden behind a paywall or a login wall, the only way that they understand what your product is by what you talk about it. And what you talk about is the last thing that you hone. So the first thing I do is swap that around. In the same way that you've built a pitch for your VCs, you want to kind of build a pitch for your customers. Like if you're spending 12 months building, anyone that comes to your website before then, you want to capture them. You want to get them on your mailing list. You want to get them following you on Twitter or social media. So start really by thinking about what you're building first. Amazon, famously, and it's not just an Amazon thing, have this technique of let's write the launch pitch, the PR pitch before we even start building.
Wow.
Because what you're doing is you're thinking, in 12 months' time, when we launch this, what's it going to be? Okay, it's going to be this class of product. It solves this kind of problems for these kind of people at this kind of price point. Great, we now know what we're building. It's an exercise in framing. So I think do some of your framing up front. Do some of your testing up front. Like an MVP doesn't have to be a bunch of features and functions that you're kind of Wizard of Ozing behind the background. An MVP can be a landing page with a pitch. And you say to the world, hey, I'm building this thing and it solves this problem. Come and sign up. And you could have 2 or 3 or 4 different landing pages that got different framings, and figure out which one is the one that kind of really resonates with people. And then once you understand what resonates, then that can inform what you build. And so I think you should be putting your launch plan from day one rather than like a week or 2 before you launch, because that's too late. I think the other thing, some of this comes down to why VCs invest in certain companies and other companies. It's not only this, but I think a lot of founders believe that the reason that VCs invest is because theirs is the best vision and theirs is the best product. And sure, that has a big part of that.
Definitely.
But the reality is that lots of people have probably had that vision before. I will see things repeating. I will see a team come to me and they think they've kind of got this amazing first ever idea.
Unique.
And I saw that 12 months ago and it didn't work. And I saw that 2 years ago and it didn't work. And I know that probably if I don't invest in these people, I will see it again in 12 months' time. So the idea isn't that important. And actually, if you come from an engineering background, if you come from a design and product background, I've probably got pretty good faith that you can build this thing. The problem I have isn't whether you can build it, is whether anyone will care. And so what am I looking for? I'm looking for a team that has maybe some past proof that they can sell. Maybe they've had a startup before, like, even if it didn't do as well, they've had to go through that learning process. They've had to understand founder-led sales, founder-led marketing. There's this kind of sort of quite funny tweet, who I can't remember who said it, but, first-time founders obsess around product. Second-time founders obsess over distribution. And that's absolutely true, because the first time you lose, probably not because you've not got the best product, because no one cares. This time around, you don't make that same mistake. So this is why a lot of VCs really, really love second-time founders, because they've learned those mistakes. This is why VCs like founders that have come from established startups before, because they've seen these mistakes happen. VCs also like people that come from established startups before, because they know they've got a network.
Yep.
It's a shame, but like if you've never worked in tech before and you've got an amazing new product for school teachers, that's great. I believe that you have the vision, you can sell to school teachers, but how are you going to find a really good designer? How are you going to find a really good engineer? How are you going to find a really good salesperson? You probably don't have that in your network. And so that network value is really, really important. And so when people come to you as a VC, you're looking at the team. Like, I believe that your engineer can build this. I believe your product manager can design this. Who's going to sell this? Is this you as the founder? Are you charismatic? Are you charming? Are you willing to go out there and have conversations? Or are you going to hide away and hope someone else will do that for you? Because they probably won't. What is your go-to-market strategy? Is it, that you've already got 50,000 followers on Twitter, and those followers on Twitter are people that are going to want to buy your product? Or is it, we'll just put some Google ads up and see what happens, So understanding the go-to-market strategy and understanding the alignment that the team have with that go-to-market strategy, and whether that go-to-market strategy looks like it's likely to deliver the results, is a big part of that equation, I would say.
You talk in the book a lot of this product, founder-led sales, founders-led growth, founder-led marketing. Why? I know, what's the biggest fallacy? What does the founder lose if they don't become themselves interested, obsessed in this sales growth and so on and so forth, early stage?
I mean, the reality is if you don't get enough traction, then you don't raise the next round of funding, you run out of money, and your vision doesn't come to pass. Your job as a founder isn't to create a job that is the thing that is the perfect job for you and you love. You're not becoming a founder because I just want to hang out and I want to talk to designers.
Well, there are a lot of people that they believe that they are starting a startup to build better jobs for themselves.
Yes.
They want flexibility, they want this and that, and so on and so on.
And it's like becoming a parent. When you run a business, you are becoming a parent. And often you have to put aside all the things that you want for the benefit of your family, your kids. Like you might used to have been going out lots and drinking and partying, and you might have had loads of amazing clothes, and you might have lived the life. As soon as you have other people who are you responsible for, your whole attitude needs to change. And I think this is the challenge with a lot of founders. A lot of founders just want to do the thing that they enjoy and they love, and want to get other people. But the reality is, like, if you can't sell those, I'm not saying you do it forever, but if you can't sell the first 5, 10, 20 licenses, if you can't market and get up on stage and talk about your product, how are you even going to know what good looks like when you're trying to hire a salesperson? How are you going to know what good looks like hiring a marketer? I've met so many founders who are brilliant builders, brilliant product people, but they've gone through 2 or 3 salespeople, none of them ever work. They've gone through 2 or 3 marketers, none of them ever work. First of all, because they don't know what good looks like. And secondly, because they can't give them any direction.
Yep.
If you're an amazing developer and you can direct your other engineers, brilliant. If you're an amazing product visionary and you can direct your designers and your product people, brilliant. If you don't know how to sell, if you don't know how to market, if you don't know how to connect that value that you've built with people, then you're really, really liable to kind of have mediocre people come in and just destroy your business. And so it's one of those things that you need to get good really quickly. Now, the brilliant thing, I think, particularly if you're an engineer, like if you have that engineering mindset, like sales is very engineering. Like sales is very process driven. Like you know, a lot of it is kind of, and marketing to some extent, there's a process there. You find the right channels that work for you. You make sure that those channels are full of the people that you are trying to target. You iterate through a whole series of if it's outreach, email sequences, if it's inbound, marketing messages, until you find something that starts to resonate, and then you iterate and you improve and you improve and you improve. And if you've got a open rate of your emails that's poor, something like 2%, then you tweak it and you go to 2.5 and then 3 and then 4. It's a very engineering, scientific approach. The other thing I find is a lot of founders are like, I don't like marketing, I don't like sales. But the weird thing is, I think most founders are really good marketers and salespeople, because you've managed to convince a whole bunch of engineers that could get 3 times as much money going and working in a big tech company to come and take a risk in you. You've just, pitched to some of the biggest VCs in town and they've given you money. You are really, really good at sales. The problem isn't that you're not good at it. The problem is you don't want to do it. And so I think you need to lean into that. You need to let the other team kind of focus on the product stuff, because the reality is the product will get better and better over time, but it won't do that unless you've got people using it. A lot of people these days focus on product-led growth. But how can you lead on product-led growth if you haven't got product market fit? If you haven't got a product that is good enough to find internal growth loops and usage loops, and if you've got no users coming, like you can't have a product-led growth strategy if you've got 10, 20, 30 customers. It kicks in after you've got PLG. So after you've got a PMF, product market fit. And so you need to spend that first year getting those customers in. Once you've got those customers in, then you can hire a head of sales, a head of marketing, a head of growth. Then you can kind of lean back into the product and go, now we've got this massive flow of usage. What can I do with my product hat on to maximize it? So you will get back there eventually, but for the first year or so, growth is the main priority, I would say.
And many times I see founders, especially product and technical founders, understand marketing wrong. And they believe they should do a type of marketing which is not natural to them, and they should do a better job. I don't know, use your Twitter account. It's an incredible channel to sell your product. Use LinkedIn. Use your the network that you don't have to necessarily cold call everyone and so forth and so. There are so many ways to do it. Super important.
Absolutely, and I think the reality is that for most startups, one channel will drive the majority of usage in the early days. And I think what happens is I see lots of people trying to be over 5, 6, 7, 8 different channels, overwhelmed, don't do any one of them particularly well. And so what you have is this like low quality background radiation
Everywhere.
content. Yeah. I see so many people that got blogs and they're like, well, content marketing isn't working. And you read it and it's so boring, it's so undifferentiated. And like, it's because you're not putting the effort in there because you're stretched too thin. Yeah. So you've got to get really, really good at one channel. You've got to find the channel that works for you. Yep. And the channel that worked for you in your last job might not necessarily work for you next. This is also why I think it's really dangerous, a lot of people, when they outsource. Because what they do is they go, okay, well, I don't know how to do this. I'll hire a marketer. And I'll go, well, I'll hire a content marketer that's really good on social media. And so they've already almost picked the channel they're going to go after before they've validated it. And they have somebody that produces loads of mediocre content, and they put it out, they hit their targets. So, I'm going to do 5 posts a day, and I'm going to, but none of it is genuine, none of it is helpful, and you've automatically discounted a whole bunch of other things. Like what you need is you need to have somebody who will not deliver a playbook, but will help you build the playbook. And so you can't go, I'm going to hire a content marketer, I'm going to hire a social media marketer. I need to hire somebody that can figure out which of these 5, 6, 7, 8 approaches is going to be the right one, and then write the playbook from scratch about how we're going to deliver that. And then maybe in a year or two's time, once you figure that out, then you hand it over to somebody to start delivering on particular strategies or tactics or channels. But yeah, the big part of it is finding that channel that works. And I think, like you say, for early stage founders, one that you're already on, one that you understand the culture of, one that you have network and connections with, and one that is genuine and authentic.
Once you are at this moment where you need to hire someone, how do you, hire? How do you choose? What's one methodology? Do you need to give them some also shares in your company, doing a vesting structure with them in order for them to have that skin in the game, to have that involvement of actually continuing to build the playbook with you, not just, doing some tasks there?
I mean, it's a really interesting question. I think it's a difficult one. There is plenty of academic research that shows that when you switch people's motivation from internal intrinsic motivation to external motivation through money, that actually things change fundamentally. I would argue in the early stages you want people to be along with you on the journey, not because of some outcome, but because they love what you're doing, because they love you as a founder, they love the vision, they love the mission, they love the team, and they want to do good stuff because they're people that care about doing good stuff. If you suddenly go, well, we're going to remunerate you based on, if you can hit 1,000 new followers every week, will give you, £1,000 at the end of the month, then all you're going to get is a whole bunch of low quality, followers and maybe bots. You've got to be really, really careful. And so I think if you hire the right people, they are motivated by doing good quality work. And I think most of the time, I'm a big believer in giving people shares, but the shares, the equity, it's always part of, like, when you raise funding, most VCs will always ask you to create a pool, and there will always be that opportunity to give shares. And I think you should give equity to your top talent, but that weirdly is not the thing that is motivating them. They're motivated by doing a good job, and hopefully the outcome is, if they do a good job, they will see a big benefit. And the reality is, 9 times out of 10 startups will fail, and so they won't, the equity won't materialize. But for people that have been in a company that does grow really quickly, those first 100 people that have got share options will often end up being set for life because of the kind of the gearing that happens with unicorn exits and what have you. So, but that is rarely a motivator in the early stages. What it can be is, it can be a way of getting top talent in, because you can say, hey, look, I can't pay you what you're getting at the current company, but we'll give you a decent share package, and that will sort of balance itself out. So it's less the motivation, it's more of a package negotiation. But yeah, I would be really wary of people that are just going, I'm going to jump from job to job purely based on equity, because if startups are up and down, and the last thing you want is every time you're in a bit of a down, someone says, I'm going to leave now because my equity isn't worth that much, I'm not sure things are going in the right direction, I'm going to jump somewhere else. Like, you want people that are going to stick around and care, and it's that passion of doing a good job, I think, is the thing that drives people.
There's also sort of academic research about building this type of loyalty with your employees. And they were the ones I read, they were saying that having people that are maybe don't have the best skills that you can find, but you can like help them also grow their skills and become better and better, rather than hiring top performer, helps you build that loyalty. What would you recommend to startups working with, trying to bring the best guy for the job, or having maybe someone that has the hunger to learn how to do the craft?
I mean, it's difficult. I get the idea of hiring people for, their trajectory, that whole kind of Wayne Gretzky quote of like skate to where the puck's going rather than it is. And I think there is an element of doing that. If you see people who you believe there's a lot of potential in them, I think hiring for potential is good. The problem is that you need them to deliver that potential now or in 6 months' time, not in 2 or 3 years' time. And actually, if you're having to invest a lot of you or your design or engineering manager's time into upskilling those people, you might not have that time in your runway or budget. So I think there's a real balance. I think you should have some high potential people, but these people probably need to be folks that are self-starters, and the way that they will reach that potential is not through lots of training and support, but through throwing them in an environment where you give them stretch goals. So I think startups are a great environment for giving people stretch goals and seeing them lean into that skill. And so if you're happy, if that's your management style, and you're allowing people to kind of, they've never managed before, but you give them a stretch goal and they manage and they do a really good job, that's great. So I think you can do that. But at the same time, when you have to hit certain targets in a certain amount of time, you maybe don't have the ability to just hire mid-range staff and kind of scale them up. So I do think you also need to try and get the best talent you possibly can, which is right for the stage you are. And I think it's the right for the stage you are bit is the difficulty. Because the other problem is people go out and hire the best LLM person that's worked in Google, the best design leader that's worked in IDEO, the best marketing person that's worked in, insert world-class marketing company. And they either pay them $300,000-400,000 a year, and then that is your runway gone down from 18 months to kind of 6, and that's impossible. Or they get so much worth of equity that there's none left over for your later stage.
And your cap table is
a mess. And the other problem is if you're hiring that really top talent, most of that top talent is managerial. They're top talent because they're brilliant at managing a marketing team of 20 people. They're brilliant at managing an engineering team, an LLM kind of team of 50 people. Like, they might not be the right person to be doing your core code.
Getting their hands dirty.
Yeah, they might not be the right person. Like that CMO is probably not the right person to be writing a dozen different, blog posts or a white paper or, taking photos and uploading it to social. And so I often see a mismatch. It's the right talent for the stage you are. And so, I think that's what you need to be focusing on, the best talent for where you are. And the reality is, unfortunately, like that amazing marketer that is brilliant today might not necessarily scale with your company. The same is true of your engineer. Like, you'll start and you want amazing generalists. And you're not going to need people that know how to scale products because there's no scaling problem at the moment. And you're not having to worry about people that are brilliant at kind of performance or brilliant at kind of, avoiding bugs. Because if something breaks, it doesn't matter. You've got 10 users, so, but maybe in a year or two's time, when you now have got 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 users, that person might not be right for where the company is. And either they need to scale up and get better at the performance-related things or the specialization in marketing, or it's time to either bring somebody else in above them or maybe even kind of cycle them out. And so it is a real challenge. You've got to find the right people. Like, it's like a sports team. And the team you had when you were kind of like a Sunday league kick-around football team is not the same team as if you want to be in the Premiership. Yep. And at every stage you go up a level, you attract different people of different caliber, and you move people in and out. But you want the team to be as good as it possibly can for that stage and that budget and those set of skills you need.
One of the most important milestones an early stage startup wants to hit, it's the MVP, having the MVP. How does a good enough MVP look like? What is it? How much do you, I don't know, wait to build it? Any
I mean, I think I've got a whole section in the book around kind of why MVP is often the most poorly understood kind of concept
it's so confusing.
in startup.
It's so confusing if you look.
But this is the weird thing. It's not that confusing. But people, there's a story in the book around how a company I was working with spent about 18 months building an MVP.
18 months.
About 18 months building their MVP.
Wow.
And they were sure this was the smallest thing they could build. Because they were looking at the market and they were looking what was out there, and they had to have feature parity with everything there, and they also had to have a whole bunch of other new features that were amazing, and everyone they spoke to said, oh, you've got to absolutely have this at launch and that at launch. And they spent 18 months, and then they launched, and nobody used it, and it struggled and it struggled and it struggled, and they positioned it to a different audience, and they had to add a whole bunch of new features in, and that audience didn't like it. Then they positioned it to a third audience, and that audience didn't like it. And in the end, I was like, just saying, like, you've got to get something in the hands of customers really quickly. And so they scrapped their product, and literally within 2 weeks they built something that was quick, that delivered value, that wasn't hidden behind a sign up, wasn't overly complicated, and it exploded.
Wow.
And afterwards I was talking to the PM there, and he was like, we really genuinely thought we built an MVP. And it was only after we had that conversation with you and we ripped it out and we spent this thing and we spent 2 weeks on it. And we just thought, this is not going to work. Like, a 2-week thing is not going to work. And it exploded. And it was only then that we're like, oh, this is what an MVP looks like. It's really minimal. So, but I think a lot of the time people are wanting to do a good job. They want to do high quality work. And an MVP is not high quality work. And so we're constantly dragged away from doing the M bit of MVP. But a lot of the time, the MVP isn't even a product. Like I say, it's a landing page. It's an email. It's a...
what should be the purpose of an MVP?
It's to learn. It's to understand. It's to have a dialogue with your customers and users to figure out whether they'll start getting value. Where is the value? How do we capture that value? How do we bottle it? How do we communicate it? And the other thing is that I've got a few founders I'm working with at the moment that have they came and pitched to us with a really big vision, but then once they started building that MVP, it's like, this isn't working. And rather than keep going on, in 2 or 3 weeks, they're like, we built something really quickly, we put it out in the market, we've realised a whole bunch of our assumptions were wrong, we're going to do another one, and they put it in the market. That's not working either. Put it in the market. They've had 3 or 4 tries, but they've had 3 or 4 tries in the space of 2 or 3 months. They've still got like a 2-year runway. They've got plenty of time to figure this stuff out. Whereas if you spend 6 months on every try and you've got an 18-month runway, like you're kind of hitting a wall before you figure this stuff out. And so I think have less certainty around your vision, realize it's a hypothesis, and test that hypothesis. And there are multiple ways you can test a hypothesis really, really quickly.
I am so... and we had already 4 cohorts of startups that we worked with, and every time we talk about MVP, it's so hard to take them from that. An MVP should do this and that, and the other hand, I'm just trying to say, no, you have to just learn what do you need to build next. That's the one thing that an MVP should do, and as fast as possible. And
people think it's a waste of time. Going back to our earlier conversation, if you have a big vision and if you raise a load of money based on that vision, if everyone's telling you your vision is perfect, MVPs feel like a speed bump. What is the purpose of wasting our time building this rubbishy thing when we know that the thing we're going to build is perfect? And it's really difficult to kind of talk people down off the ledge, and they go off and they build that perfect thing, and it's only then that they realize, oh, this thing isn't perfect after all. Had they listened to you earlier, then they might have avoided kind of, there might have been a lot of things they could have learned and they've gone in a different direction. But it is what it is. I think try and do as much, it's value per developer cycle. The more you can learn, the faster you can learn with the least amount of effort expended in order to kind of validate your hypothesis or invalidate your hypothesis is the way to go.
Andy, thank you so much for joining us. I have so many other questions, but I will definitely order the book and most likely I will have a lot of answers here. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to read the book and maybe have you also back in a couple of months with our startups.
I would love that. I mean, all of the questions you ask are really, really heavy themes in the book. So definitely go and have a read of the book, and then in a few months' time.
After I saw the outline, I don't think it's a book. I think it's a guide.
Yes.
I think it's a guide.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is it. A lot of people have said, and it's on some of the quotes on the back, that, it's like a coach in your pocket.
Yeah.
Like, why go and... I mean, this is why I wrote the book.
A manual.
Yeah, I wrote the book really quickly. I wrote the book because there's so much growth information out there, but it's in podcasts, it's in newsletters, it's spread all over the place. And my goal was to try and bring this all together. So my hope is that if you are an early stage startup founder, you're trying to grow your product, like this is the only sort of, at least the first book that you can turn to, and about 80% of what you need is in there. So you don't have to go and spend thousands of pounds on a course or tens of thousands of pounds on a growth coach like me. Like literally I'm giving away my livelihood in this book to people for
awesome.
like, 20, 30 bucks. Cause I think it's important.
Can't wait to read it. Thank you so much, Andy. Guys, make sure you get it on Amazon as soon as possible. Wish you all the best, Andy, and thank you again.
My pleasure.